a demand for more answers on Israel's nuclear arsenal. 30 House Democrats sent a letter to Secretary of State Marco Rubio urging the Trump administration to acknowledge Israel's nuclear program and for more assurances given the ongoing war with Iran. They write, quote, Congress has a constitutional responsibility to be fully informed about the nuclear balance in the Middle East and the risk of escalation by any party to this conflict, and the administration's planning and contingencies for such scenarios. We do not believe that we have received that information. This is sort of like an open secret. Everybody knows that Israel has nukes. We don't know how many. Is it time for there to be more transparency around that?
Well, it's not up to us. I mean, it's a very interesting story because we were put in a difficult position by the state of Israel. Some people out there might not know this, but the United States government tried really hard to prevent Israel from having nuclear weapons. It was not in the state and national interests of the United States under the administrations of Dwight Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson for Israel to have the bomb. The French engaged in a covert operation with Israel to help Israel build its capacity. The French were not straightforward with us about it, and the Israelis were not straightforward with us. By the end of the 60s, you have a new administration that comes into town, and the French have changed their policy, and they're now not selling weapons to Israel anymore. The Israelis come to our government and say, we'd like to buy F-4s, Phantom bombers. We're willing to do that, but we say to the Israelis, but you've got to announce that you will never introduce nuclear weapons into the Middle East. Because we were very worried about an arms race in the Middle East. And we were afraid that if the Israelis announced that they had nuclear weapons, the Egyptians would go to the Soviets and say, would you give us a nuclear guarantee? And we'd find ourselves in a Cuban Missile Crisis, but in the Middle East. So the Nixon administration, which, by the way, the Joint Chiefs of Staff didn't want Israel to have nuclear weapons. The State Department didn't want them. Really, none of the leaders in that administration wanted them to have nuclear weapons, but they had them. And so the U.S. government came up with this fix, which was basically, don't say to the world that you have them, and don't introduce them. In other words, don't assemble a weapon, and we'll sell you Phantoms. Because the administration was afraid that if they didn't sell Phantoms to Israel, members of Congress who were supportive of Israel would say, why aren't you helping the Israelis out? And the U.S. government didn't want to say, well, we're not helping them because they have nuclear weapons, because we don't do that. You know, we don't talk about the number of nuclear weapons France has. We don't talk about the number of nuclear weapons that the UK has. Those countries announced themselves that they were nuclear powers. So it has never been our policy as a government to tell people about our allies' nuclear arsenals if they don't say it themselves. And we're stuck in this policy because of the Cold War. It's a problem.
But now that there's a hot war in the Middle East, does that change the calculus?
To advance the interest of the United States, to force Israel to cough up this furball when everybody already does it anyway, what's the point?
Especially since the ambiguity, the strategic ambiguity of this between Nixon and Meyer at the time has led to 50 years of a lack of an arms race outside of Israel, right? Egypt does not, to our knowledge, have a bomb. Lebanon, Syria, all these countries did not develop nuclear weapons as a result of us essentially looking the other way.
Yes, but one of the things that has fallen away is our leverage. We've never had a lot of leverage over the state of Israel when it comes to its decisions on national security. They're an independent country. They have different our national interests and their national interests do overlap, but not completely. And Israel, time and again, and it's a Republican and Democratic administrations that have always been faced with this challenge, Israel does what Israel wants to do. And one of the things we haven't done as much of as that we could is, like a good ally who wants Israel to persevere, we haven't used our leverage to say to Israel sometimes, the war you've launched against Hamas deserves it, but the way you're fighting it, it's not good for the international system and it's not good for us. That's what I think is going on here, and it's a good debate to have, not on the nuclear issue, but how can the United States use its leverage to make the Middle East more peaceful?
So here are some of the questions that Joaquin Castro is posing on this issue. Maybe this might answer some of your questions. What nuclear weapons capability does Israel have? Has the administration received any assurances from Israel that nuclear weapons will not be used? Has Israel communicated to the United States any nuclear doctrine, any red lines or thresholds for nuclear use in the context of the current conflict with Iran? Has the administration assessed what circumstances could lead Israel to consider nuclear use? What contingency planning has the administration conducted for such a scenario? I mean, we do. Look.
Is there? I'm asking an honest question. Why? I mean, has there been some rumor that says that Israel is going to nuke Iran?
Here's the thing. I guess the question is again, now there's been a change of status quo. Mm-hmm. There's a war between the United States, Israel, and Iran that is going on right now in the Middle East. And under those circumstances, that is actually different from what we've been experiencing for the last, 40, 50 years. And so under those circumstances, there's only one power in the Middle East that has a nuke, and it's Israel. And so the question is, what are the circumstances? What are the boundaries? Are there any boundaries? They don't acknowledge that they have them. People know that they do, but are there any boundaries? And I think that seems like a fair question to ask.
I'm assuming that they're in executive session.
I'm breaking tonight. Totally unacceptable. Those words from President Trump rejecting Iran's response to the latest peace proposal for ending the war, adding that he doesn't, quote, like it. Though President Trump offered no specifics about the Iranian response and what it contained, this follows weeks of stalled negotiations between the two countries with no clear end in sight. Also tonight, an Israeli official confirmed with MS Now that Prime Minister Netanyahu and Trump spoke by phone today. All of this, of course, comes as Trump is expected to meet China's leader Xi Jinping this week for a high-stakes summit. The two are expected to discuss the ongoing Iran war, trade, and Taiwan, among other points. Xi, for his part, has urged for the Strait of Hormuz to reopen. Meanwhile, Trump is optimistic about the upcoming talks.
My relationship is very good with President Xi. I don't know the other leaders, but President Xi is a good man, smart man, loves China. And I look forward to being there. We did this once before, and it was amazing. I think it's going to be an amazing trip.
Starting us off tonight to unpack all of this, Amir Hanjani, fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Also with us is Andy Brown, China columnist at Semaphore and editor of Semaphore's China newsletter. So, Amir, let's start with you. Trump did not disclose what exactly he didn't like about this deal that he rejected from Iran. But what do you know about the contours of what this last round's agreement had in it?
Well, it's not surprising. Trump wants everything up front. That's his negotiation style. The single most valuable thing that Iran has that Trump wants is the enriched uranium. He wants that out of Iran. He wants that out of Iran as a first step. The Iranians know that if they give that up, they've lost all their leverage. That's an irreversible step for them. Trump can offer all sorts of things. He can offer sanctions relief. He can offer an end to the war. But those are all reversible. Sanctions come back on, war can start in the middle of negotiations again, as has happened twice before. So the Iranians aren't going to give that up because they recognize that that's an irreversible step for them. They've loaded up everything else first. Let's talk about the end of the war in Lebanon, end of the war with Iran, sanctions relief, opening up the Straits of Hormuz, ending the blockade. They're willing to do all that first, and then we'll talk about the enriched uranium. Trump wants the reverse. He wants the enriched uranium out first.
Well, there's another person who's signaling that this war is far from over, and that is Benjamin Netanyahu, who sat down with 60 Minutes and very much signaled that there's more to come here. It certainly sounds like he's saying that he's had conversations with President Trump about whether it's a joint operation or at least an American commitment to send people in to go after the enriched uranium that you were just talking about.
Yeah, which is a farce. That's a fantasy, because the enriched uranium is buried underground. In Esfahan and possibly in other sites. You'd have to go in there with hundreds of people. You have to bring in diggers and movers. It's an operation that would take days and weeks. Can you imagine American and Israeli forces inside Iranian territory? It's a country of 92 million people. They're going to be under siege by all sides, by the IRGC, the Iranian army. Even local Iranians would attack them. So that's not really doable. What Benjamin Netanyahu really wants is a resumption of the war. Because if the war resumes, all of his personal and political problems get put to the back burner. As long as that war continues and the United States is
The mainstream corporate media is running a massive damage control operation right now to keep you completely blindfolded, because behind the scenes in Washington, the absolute breaking point has just been reached. If you turn on the evening news networks, they are feeding the public a heavily sanitized, pre-approved narrative to hide a historic constitutional showdown that is actively threatening to dismantle the executive branch before sunrise. While the corporate anchors try to downplay the psychological fracturing happening inside the Oval Office, high-level indicators and a breathtaking congressional rebellion prove that the machinery for an instant executive stoppage has officially been set into motion. The corporate screen wants you looking anywhere else, but tonight, the unredacted transcript data coming straight from the corridors of power reveals a political explosion that has backed the administration into an absolute corner. The biggest shockwave just hit Capitol Hill, where a bipartisan coalition of exactly 60 United States senators moved in total secrecy to completely freeze Donald Trump's massive $200 billion emergency military budget. The corporate networks are trying to tell you this is just a routine procedural delay over domestic defense spending, but that is an absolute lie designed to protect the establishment. The real reason 60 senators just banded together to block this multi-billion-dollar war chest is a terrifying, highly classified intelligence dispute regarding Israel's undeclared nuclear weapons arsenal and a secret, subterranean military operation that Trump is privately planning to launch inside Iranian territory. This terrifying crisis exploded into the public view immediately after a group of 30 House Democrats sent an urgent, heavily worded letter to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, demanding that the Trump administration immediately acknowledge Israel's nuclear weapons program and provide explicit written assurances that American forces will not be dragged into a catastrophic nuclear escalation. The lawmakers are openly weaponizing their constitutional responsibility to be fully informed about the nuclear balance in the Middle East, stating directly that the administration has actively withheld critical national security data from the American people while pushing the country toward an apocalyptic hot war with Iran. What the general public does not understand is that Israel's nuclear arsenal has been the ultimate open secret in global politics for over 50 years, a strategic ambiguity established all the way back during the Nixon administration to prevent a massive nuclear arms race across the Middle East. For decades, the United States government looked the other way, pretending they didn't know how many warheads Israel possessed, a policy born out of extreme Cold War pressure that effectively stripped Washington of its ultimate leverage over Tel Aviv. But tonight, that delicate 50-year-old diplomatic facade has completely cracked under the weight of an active, escalating hot war. The unredacted data reveals that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just held a highly secretive, high-stakes phone call with Donald Trump to negotiate a joint military operation, a fantasy mission that would send hundreds of American and Israeli ground forces directly into Iranian territory to physically dig out enriched uranium buried deep underground in Esfahan. Military analysts are privately warning that this plan is an absolute suicide mission, a geopolitical farce that would trap American soldiers inside a hostile nation of 92 million people, completely under siege by the Iranian army, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and local populations fighting to protect their borders. Yet, Donald Trump is moving forward with absolute blind loyalty to Netanyahu's agenda, rejecting Iran's latest peace proposals out of hand by simply stating he doesn't like it, without offering a single specific alternative or diplomatic pathway forward. This total submissiveness to foreign interests has forced 60 senators to pull the ultimate legislative emergency brake, blocking the $200 billion military budget to starve the administration of the operational funds required to deploy troops into this Middle Eastern cauldron. The structural rot and ethical collapse of this administration are being laid bare by a rapid succession of public disasters that are driving Washington insiders into absolute madness. Congress is explicitly weaponizing a devastating paper trail of system-wide failures that cannot be swept under the rug. Look at the shocking data emerging from the press corps, where White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt physically collapsed on live television during a routine briefing. An incident that high-level intelligence whispers was the direct result of a hyper-toxic, psychologically abusive backroom environment created by an increasingly erratic and unstable commander-in-chief. Almost simultaneously, a high-profile witness in a federal case linked to the dark network of Jeffrey Epstein fainted inside a federal courtroom while providing sworn testimony about extensive cover-ups and explicit obstruction of justice allegedly ordered directly by Trump himself. The paper trail of this systemic degradation does not stop there. A highly classified, leaked Department of Justice memo written by Attorney General Pam Bondi has surfaced, documenting explicit, lawless presidential directives ordering the systemic redaction of names belonging to high-profile political associates from sensitive federal materials. To make matters even more explosive, newly declassified transcripts reveal that FBI Director Kash Patel was caught dead to rights lying under oath during a closed-door congressional hearing regarding completely unauthorized, weaponized domestic investigations, providing undeniable proof that the highest enforcement officials in the nation have committed perjury in a desperate bid to shield the president from criminal liability. This cascade of institutional fractures is exactly why the legislative math required to finalize this executive freeze is shockingly precise and terrifyingly achievable. It takes exactly 60 votes in the Senate to overcome a filibuster and control the purse strings of the military, and tonight, that threshold has been crossed to stop Trump's war plans dead in their tracks. This isn't some minor political disagreement. It is a deep, systematic rebellion within the halls of Congress, where even independent factions are realizing that the administration's blind adherence to foreign dictates is putting national security at extreme risk. Insiders are now openly asking why Donald Trump, much like his historic admiration for foreign oligarchies, is so deeply indebted to the Israeli political system that he is willing to risk an American financial collapse and an immediate stock market crash to fight their battles. Whispers are growing louder inside executive sessions about potential bribery, blackmail, and leverage-building operations conducted years ago by political networks linked directly to Jeffrey Epstein's private island, suggesting that foreign intelligence services may possess devastating, unreleased documentation that completely controls the president's executive decisions. While these allegations remain unproven in a formal court of law, the undeniable reality on the ground is that Trump is preparing to weaponize every legal loophole to bypass the Senate block, trying to repurpose existing defense funds, filing emergency federal injunctions to unlock the $200 billion, and demanding that his voter base rally against what he labels an unconstitutional administrative coup by a rogue Congress. This unprecedented funding freeze is happening at the exact same moment Trump is scheduled to fly into a high-stakes global summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. The Chinese government is already moving its own chess pieces, demanding the immediate reopening of the crucial Strait of Hormuz and warning that an American military intervention in Iran will trigger massive, irreversible economic countermeasures across international trade routes and the Taiwan Strait. Trump is publicly trying to project supreme confidence, claiming his personal relationship with President Xi is amazing, but behind closed doors, his legal and military advisors are in a state of absolute panic because they know they cannot fight a multi-front economic war with China while their domestic military budget is completely frozen by 60 of their own senators. The corporate networks are desperately trying to frame this budget freeze as routine political infighting because their billionaire handlers are terrified of what happens when the general public realizes that the structural pillars of the state are completely fracturing from within. They need you distracted with pre-approved corporate talking points so you miss the terrifying transition of power happening right behind the curtain. But we refuse to play by their establishment rules on this channel, and we will never let the algorithms silence the raw, unredacted data. The shift in public opinion is massive and undeniable. The average independent voter is completely turning against these endless foreign entanglements And younger generations within both parties are demanding total transparency regarding nuclear weapons, secret alliances, and backroom financial influence.